have a green view, center X and center Y. Let's go ahead and set constraints on it. Do we all have our green view? Okay. Did we remove all our constraints? Okay, so let's start together. So here I have my green view. I go to the align button and I click on horizontal and vertically centered. I click on add to constraints. I still need to have a width and a height on my green box. I click on my green box. I go to add new constraints. I click on the width, which is 100, and I click on the height, which is 100, and I click on add to constraints. At this point, I've added all my constraints. Autolayout has no issues, right? All my lines are blue. We want to go ahead and edit our constraint. We click on the green box again. We double click on align X here. Does everybody have an align X here? I double click on align X to super view. Right? Where it says first item, I click on first item to edit what the first item is. I click on trailing here. Currently it's center X of the green. I want it to be trailing center. I click on trailing center. Because that side, I want the right side, in other words, the trailing side to be center of that Y. Exactly. It's a bit confusing because we're editing the X, right? It looks like we should be editing the Y, but it's not because the X is where we want to be center, right? We want it to be center vertically with the vertical line. So the trailing of the green is that trailing there. How are we doing so far? All right. At this point, I want to have a second box. I want to have a second box next to my green box. What is the easier way to get a second box here? Option click, right? So option drag. I'm going to option drag from my green box, option drag, right? This guy has constraints. I want to remove the constraints on it. Be very careful here. If you option drag a view, the view will have constraints as well, right? Do we see the constraints on this one? Right? We could keep the constraints because that we also want those constraints, but we'll remove the constraints and add them again. So how do we remove constraints on a view? How do we remove constraints on a view? We clear constraints, or we could actually delete them as well in the size inspector, right? So many ways to do things in Xcode, which is great. So here we have no more constraints on my green view. I'll change my green view to a different color, right? So use any color you want. Here I'll use yellow. So my yellow box, I'll go ahead and drag it right next to my green box. That's where I want it to be. I want it to be aligned with my green box. Currently, it's not auto-laid out, right? If we were to run it, it would not be correct if we go landscape. What I mean by that, if I go to my landscape orientation, look, right? My yellow box is not auto-laid out. Everybody? My green box is perfect, but my yellow box is not. So we need to fix that. Let's go ahead and fix that. We'll see a different way to control drag and add constraints from one view to a next view. We'll control drag directly on our scene. I'll control drag from my yellow view, over, right? Control drag over to my green view. Do we see that? I release. Let's go back here. We want to constrain the yellow view to the green view. So it basically interlocks with it. Yes, we're going to do that too, and then we'll have the horizontal distance the same, right? So we want the two views to interlock with each other. That's the purpose of this particular exercise. Yes, exactly. So we want them to be next to each other regardless of what orientation it is. All right, so we will control drag from the yellow over to the green. Let me zoom in so we could see. So what I want is horizontal spacing. I'll click on horizontal spacing. Horizontal spacing is left to right. So I want that horizontal spacing. I want equal widths and equal heights. And center vertically. So those are the four we'll grab here. That should be enough to satisfy all our constraints. So one, we'll have horizontal spacing. How does it align with our green view? We'll have center vertical. So center vertical with the center of the green. Everybody? So center of the yellow will be center of the green. Same center. And there'll be same equal widths and same equal heights. Cool? So we'll go ahead and select those. So shift, select horizontal, shift, select center vertical, shift, select equal, shift, select equal heights. Already we see it's all blue. Like we haven't even completed everything, but we see it's all blue already. So we selected horizontal spacing, center vertically, widths and heights. Yes, sir. Say that again. When we control drag, so you control drag from the yellow view over to the green view. Anybody want us to go over that? Anybody want us to go over it? Okay, so we'll do it again. I will remove, what's your question, sir? You could do it. We need to know how to do things different places so that you don't go to somebody, oh, I never saw that before. It's up to where you want to be, right? But you need to know different places to do that. Very good. All right, so I want to remove the constraints on our yellow view, so we do it again. So I click on my yellow view. I go to Reset Constraints, and I clear the constraints on the selected view, not all the views, on selected views. Click on your green, make sure it has all the constraints. Does your green still have the constraints? Okay, so let's do the yellow again. I'll control drag from the yellow box over to the green box. My dialog box will come up. Does it come up for you, Mr. Wan? Very good. So here, control drag from yellow to green. My dialog box comes up. I zoom in. Which ones do we need? Which one are we shifting and selecting? Horizontal spacing, center vertical, equal widths, and equal heights. At this point, our constraints are all happy, right? They're all celebrating blue lines here. So if we use our orientation button here, I go to landscape, it's still centered as opposed to what we had before, right? If I change my phone to a 4S, I change my phone to a 4S, it's still centered, right? My 4S goes to portrait, it's still centered. I go to an iPad 12.9, it's still centered. I zoom in to show my entire iPad, still centered. Go to landscape, it's still centered. So regardless of device here, we are centered. Everybody? Yes?
I don't know what I did. I was playing around with after. So after I had changed, because I had it 200 before, so I started and then I went to where we can edit it, and decided right now I edited it to 100, and the goal changed to 100. And then I just wanted to because I wanted to do it anyway. But then when I changed the orientation, I saw that, because I even put a space in between them, a little bit of a space in between them, and it still was all blue. When I do my orientation, now my yellow is like done.
Practice, do it again. Do it again. That's how we get better with Autolayout. Okay. It depends on what you want to move. Let's try. So here, if I want to edit the size of my green, let's see what happens. So Eric is asking if he wants to change the size up or down of his green, what happens? So on my green, I'll select my green button. I'll go to the size constraints, right? I'll go to, let's zoom in here. I'll go to my heights. I'll change height to, say, 200. Is that fair? I'll press enter, right? I'll zoom back. It still holds, right? Everybody, we do not edit. Do not edit, pay attention here. Do not edit your constraints using the width and height here on the view. Everybody, very important. If you want to edit constraints, you go to the constraint to edit. You click edit on the constraint, you edit that constraint. You do not edit the view itself. That's going to break your constraints. Okay? All right, excellent. So here we are good. How are we doing with time? Great. All right. Let us see. Let's create a third view controller. Sorry, a fourth. I'm seeing three. I'm saying three. Let's create a fourth view controller. Everybody understood how to do the third view controller, right? This one is going to take practice. Obviously, we have good practice in lab. Okay, in lab we have good practice with auto layout exercises. This is one of them. All right, cool. Let's go to our fourth view controller. So go ahead of me here. Get a fourth view controller, drag it in. Drag in a fourth view controller. All right. And we know what we're doing. We're changing the ID in the identity inspector, storyboard ID. Auto layout 4. I'll just copy that string. And I'll go to my view controller scene. I'll edit the view controller as well to auto layout 4. I'll press enter. We have no warnings, right? At this point, actually, let's push to Xcode. Let's push to GitHub. Let's push to GitHub. One thing, as you're working with auto layouts, as your views are getting complex, you really want to start pushing to GitHub, right? Because you don't want to get too deep and having to do Control Z. What if you close your application, you come back, really push. Like at that point, all our constraints are working. We have no layout issues. Everybody with me? That's a good point to stop and push to GitHub. So let's create our local Git. So I'll go to source control. I'll go to source control. I'll click on create Git repository, right? I'll click on create. Did the dialog come up? Dialog came up, correct? Click on source control. Click on create Git repository. Click on create button. At this point, nobody should have Git already existed, correct? If you have it, you add it in the wrong column. So in that case, skip this for now, and we'll help you later. All right, so now let's go to our navigation window. We spoke about that last week, sorry. You were sick that day. But we'll help you afterwards. All right, so we go to our navigation window, correct? We go to our navigation window. I go to my source navigator here, source control navigator. Let me zoom in. So I have my project navigator, correct? Do we see that? I go to my source control navigator. I click on it. I right click on where it says auto layout. Do we see auto layout? Do we see auto layout? I right click on it. I click on create auto layout remote. Do we see create auto layout remote? I click on it. And now I have my dialog. Do we have the dialog that says create remote? Do we have this dialog open? Okay, so here we could edit what we want. I could change my repository name if I want, auto layout demo. I could give it a description, introduction to auto layout in iOS development. I could keep it public. I'll keep remote name the same, origin. And at this point, I'll click on create. So when I click on the create button, it pushes my repo to GitHub. So I click on create. It pushes my local repository to github.com. I verify that it's actually on GitHub. I go to my browser, I go to GitHub, I go to my repositories, I see Autolayout remote demo, and I'm in my repo. Everybody? Everybody? Anna, were you able to execute those?
No, because when I got it,
You have a get already? Yeah, because accidentally you saved it in a folder that has a get already. Cool. So we'll help you. Like in the future, I'll really stop before we save the file. I'll make sure that we're saving it in a non-get folder. Cool. So once you save it in a non-get folder, you're able to do what we just did. Cool. So now we have our folder, and all is good. We haven't done anything in the view controller. This is good. Everybody good here? Everybody good? So your project is on GitHub. Let's go back. We have 15 minutes. We could go through some more examples. Let's go back to our project. We go back to our project. Are we still here? Okay. So dragging a button. Yeah, dragging a button. Let's get a button going. UI button. What do you want to change? What do you want to change? You said. Okay, so click on our fourth view controller and get to the library, and it's a UI button. Drag in a UI button here. Come on, button. All right, let me zoom up here so we can see what's going on. So I'm on my fourth view controller. I have a button. Let's give it a color. I'll go to the Attributes Inspector. Attributes Inspector. I will give my view a color. Again, UI button inherits from view. So if you want to change the color, the button itself doesn't have a color, but the view has a color property. So I go to my view, and I change the background color. I love orange. You could change. I just love orange, sorry. Choose any color you want. It's a UI button. And go ahead.
So our very first scene, the very first thing that we have, it comes from view control. When we go over to the identity inspector, mine says view control.
That's the class that, yeah.
But everyone after that says UI.
Yes, that's the parent. We haven't subclassed it. It doesn't have a subclass to control it.
Okay.
We'll talk about that next week. For now, we're just doing UI.
Okay, well, I was asking that, two of them, like, the first two take on the name that I did, but then, like, by the scene, but then my last two by the scene, it still says.
You could edit it. We'll edit this one. Like to edit the actual name of it, Tiffany, to edit the actual name, you click on where it says, you see where my auto layout 4 is?
Right.
I click on it. I click on it again, and I'm able to just edit it there. Exactly. Okay, cool. So we have our button. It's an orange button. Click on the orange button. Go to your size inspector. And for the width, we do not have any constraints yet. No constraints yet. For the width, make it 60. For the height, make it 60. All right, so it's 60 by 60. So far, so good? So far, so good. All right, cool. So this is good. That's a button. It's a UI button. We dragged in a UI button. Remove the label on the button. We remove the label on the button by going to the Attributes Inspector. You go to the Attributes Inspector, and right below title there, just remove the button. So it should just be a plain old orange button. So far, so good. All right. Next step, we want to drag in 3 other buttons from that particular button. So go ahead and option click while I answer the question. Drag in 3 other buttons from that one button. So we'll have 4 buttons in all on the same line. Go ahead, Tiffany. Question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. How did you increase the size of it again?
You click on the button. Where do you go to change the size of a button? Size inspector. You should not have so many. Well, where it says width and height, do you see width and height on the view? There's only one width and height in that particular pane. You see the width and height? Okay, so make it square. 60 by 60 is good. So we have two. Let's option click a third, and option click a fourth. Right? So far, so good. So far, so good. Any questions? Anybody stuck? Any place we need to stop? Currently, we have 4 views. They're squares. They're UI buttons. Go ahead and select all 4 buttons by clicking down on the mouse and dragging over the 4 buttons. So all your 4 buttons should be highlighted. Everybody? Okay. We'll see a new view, or we'll use a new view. It's called UI stack view. A UI stack view is a container view, very similar to like a UI image view. It has other views in it, right? In here, we have 4 buttons. We'll use a UI stack view and embed those 4 buttons inside of the UI stack view. Okay? So the UI stack view will be the parent of those 4 views. And the stack view will be able to lay out its children. Right? We'll see what that looks like. So make sure your 4 buttons are selected. Make sure your 4 buttons are selected. And let's go down to the constraints area. Do we see the constraints area here? Do we see the last button that says embed in? So embed in. Click on embed in. And select stack view. Do you see stack view? Select stack view. So we embedded the 4 buttons in a stack view. Right? Everybody did that? Okay. Now our stack view, we still need to constrain our stack view. Our stack view is not auto laid out. Everybody? So I'm not constraining my buttons. I'm constraining or using auto layout on my stack view. You still need to use auto layout on that view. Everybody? All right? So I have a parent. The parent is called the UI stack view. A UI stack view is basically a container view. It could stack its children. In our case, we could have it horizontally, or we could have it vertically. Okay? So here we have our stack view. Let's go ahead and use auto layout on our stack view. So make sure your stack view is selected. And again, if we look at the document outline, our document outline, now we have a stack view, which is the parent. The stack view is the parent of those 4 buttons. Do we see that? Okay, so now I want to align it. I want to align, sir. I want to align it horizontally. Let's horizontally align it for now. So it's centered. It's centered horizontally. So far, so good? And I want to go ahead and align it to the safe area at some constant distance. So control drag from the stack view, control drag from the stack view up to the notch area. So control drag up towards the notch area, and at that point, release. So control drag up to the notch area, and release, and select where it says tap space. Select where it says tap space to safe area. Do we see that? Click on that. At that point, it should be correctly auto laid out. You should not have any errors or warnings. Okay? So we have our 4 buttons embedded in the stack view. And how do we know the axis of the stack view? When I say axis, I mean either is it horizontally or is it vertical? Let's see what that looks like. So I click on my stack view. I go to the attributes inspector. Let's zoom in here. I go to the attributes inspector. Come on, zoom. I'm on the wrong one. Thank you, sir. Oh, yeah, that's one of those. You have to go to the document outline. So click on the document outline. Make sure your stack view is selected. Make sure your stack view is selected in the documents outline, because sometimes it's hard to select the stack view on the actual phone, the scene. So go to the documents outline, select on the stack view, and your attributes inspector should be showing the correct thing. Here we are seeing axis is horizontal. Do we see that? Right? In Swift UI, we have what's known as an H stack or a V stack, right? Here we have a horizontal stack, okay? So here we have it horizontally laid out. Everybody? If I toggle horizontal to vertical, look at that, right? This is a V stack or a vertical stack, right? So the parent is the one taking control of the children at this point. Everybody? So UI stack view is very powerful. You have a set of buttons or labels you want to lay out in some manner. You could use a UI stack view for it. It's very good. It's awesome. It's awesome for that. Other things you could do on this, let's go back to horizontal here. You could change the spacing of it. You see where it says spacing here? Spacing is in between. In between children is that spacing. Do I want more spacing? Do I want less spacing? So here we could change it to 20 and see what happens. It increases the spacing. Did it increase the spacing for you? Very good. All right. Cool. Let us zoom back here. And let's see. All right, so we have our stack view. Let's see what it looks like on the 4S. On a 4S, it still looks good. Let's see what it looks like in landscape. Landscape, it also looks great. Right? So stack views are powerful. Stack views are awesome. Cool. So let's zoom back here. Let's go back to our... What's that? What's your question? You could do more than one row. You could do a calculator, if that's where you're going. Right? You could do a Pokemon match game. You could do anything there. Yeah. You could just like put buttons in a stack view, it lays itself out. But you just need to constrain the stack view itself. Yeah, you could do that too. Yeah. All right, so good. Let's see. I think we have time for one more thing I want to show us. There's always one more thing. All right, cool. Let's see if we have time. Let's go to our navigator. Everybody, give me 5 minutes of focus time there. Go to navigator. Everybody, go to navigator. You crashing? What do you mean you crashing? Okay, so we'll stop here for today. You good? All right. Some of the things, some of what I'll be showing, I'll come back to it, I promise. So the questions, there'll be questions. We'll come back to it. We agree? All right. So let's create a new file. So Command N, create a new file. It's going to be a Cocoa Touch class. Do we see Cocoa Touch class? Do we see Cocoa Touch? Normally we do a Swift file. Do we see Cocoa Touch? Yeah, Cocoa Touch is an umbrella of Cocoa. Cocoa is a framework that Apple has. That's Apple's framework. Cocoa Touch is for the devices, for iPad, for iPhone. Cocoa Touch is the framework we use. In Cocoa Touch, you have the UI kit classes. You have UI view, you have UI button, you have UI collection view. In order for you to subclass from any Cocoa Touch class, it has to be a Cocoa Touch class. Everybody with me? Okay, we'll talk more about it. But here, we're creating a Cocoa Touch class. So select on Cocoa Touch and click Next. For the class name, we'll call it Rounded Button. Rounded Button for now, that's fine. And it's a subclass. We've spoken about classes. It's a subclass of UI button. Make it a subclass. If yours says NS object, which it probably does say, NS object is foundation head. That's the head of all foundation classes, NS object. Everything inherits from NS object. So here, change subclass to UI button using the down arrow. Yes? Yours doesn't have UI button. Type in UI button. Right, so UI button here, and press enter. Did it come up for you, Anna? Okay, great. So here we have UI button. Language is Swift. Class name is rounded button. And we press next. Make sure your targets is checked. Group is Autolayout. Create. Okay, cool. So here we in a class, it's called rounded button. It inherits from what? UI button. It imports UI kit. We're dealing with UI button. It should import UI kit. That's what you get when you say Cocoa Touch class. You get that by default, right? If you do a normal Swift file, you could do your import UI kit by yourself. That's not a problem. But what it gives you boilerplate code. Like if you want to draw stuff by yourself here, now you could draw with this draw rect. We're not going to talk about draw rect right now. But what we're going to do is create an IB designable. We'll create an IB designable object. We'll talk more about what that gives us. But for now, let's create this IB designable object. We will override layout subviews. We'll talk about layout subviews. Again, override is coming from the parent class of the UI view. We will call super.layout subviews. Right? We will create an IB inspectable here, very similar to our tic-tac-toe. More coming there. It's going to be a variable. We'll call it corner radius. I'm going, yeah, 1 second. I'll stop and we'll be able to type everything. Luba, we'll be able to type everything. Okay, so this is the class so far. Rounded button, that's what we have, Luba. UI button, we created this IB inspectable property here. We have an override function called layout subviews. Layout subviews gets called when the view comes on screen. It's very similar to view did load. In our view controller, we have view did load. On a UI view, we have layout subviews. It gets called if you want to have any setup thing happen on your view, right? As your view comes up, you know the frame, you could change things on the view. Here, we want to change the corner radius of our view. We want to make our button look rounded, okay? So that's where we come to do it. So here on my layout subviews, every view, again, we'll go through this again. The more we see a concept, the more it sticks. So here we have a view. A view has a layer. For people coming from Photoshop, when you lay a view, you have layers to create your view, whatever your screen, whatever it is in Photoshop. Here, a view has a layer. Every view has a layer. So picture like a view as a pancake. At the top, the very top of the pancake is the UI view, what you see. Below that other view or that first pancake has a layer. Okay? I have skin. Beneath my skin, there's flesh. Everybody? So that view is stacked up the same way. So here we have a layer. So on the layer of a view, every layer of a view has a property called corner radius. Okay? So I will put in corner radius here, and I'll pass in the corner radius that we have on line 14. So corner radius here. Is it the same name? Replace corner radius. Oh, sorry. This should be a float. So we want to typecast it to CG float. I think that's the first time we've seen CG float. Okay, I like that. Cool. Love it. So here we have a CG float because this expects a CG float, not an integer. So we have to type annotated to be CG float. For now, I won't do the mask because we don't have any image, so it should render correctly. Cool. So at this point, we have our class. Let's go test it out. Everybody? Okay. So default is radius 8. Let's go back to, everybody typed it out? Let's go back to our storyboard. In my storyboard, I'll click on one of the buttons here. I'll go to our attributes inspector. I'll go to identity inspector. I will change my class So for the first button, I go to the identity inspector. Do we see the identity inspector, Luba? I click on class and I type in rounded. Rounded. I press enter. Type in rounded, now you change the class. Go to the attribute inspector. Do we see a corner radius now? So I think we made our button 60. So put in 30 here and press enter. I don't think it's 60. What is it? What size was it? What size is it? 30, sorry. Let's see. It looks to be 30 here. Okay, so let's go back to the corner radius and make it 15. Okay, so make it 15. It should be a circle. Everybody? Mel, is it a circle for you? Okay, very good. So we could do it for all the rest, but basically what we just did was created a class, make it IB designable. What does that mean? Now I could go to my storyboard and see what the view looks like rendered, right? I render a circle, I see a circle on storyboard, right? Without that IB designable, you won't be able to see how that view renders on your storyboard. Everybody? So it gives us access to see real time how the thing is rendered, okay? By using IB designable. Yes? The rounded button file. So let's go back to that. So a circle, if a square is 30 by 30, in order to get a circle with corner radius, you change the radius to 15.
No, that's fine, but we didn't have to do that on the attributes or the identity inspector. We did that in the round button.
Yes. Okay. Question, Matri, and we'll stop. You got it? Excellent. So we did a bunch today with Autolayout. We saw some cool things with IB Designable. IB Designable is really awesome. Right, so we have 4 views here, which we did. Great. So we have some good Autolayout chops here. We have a lab in the afternoon. There's probably like 5, 7 examples of those. You could get through like half of those. That would be ideal. That would be great. That shows your Autolayout chops there. Very good. Thank you, thank you.